Good morning and welcome to our our short class or little talk that we're going to have today about inner child work. My name is Ailsa Kepi. I'm curator of the group on Facebook, Women Healing from Emotional Abuse with Power, Passion, and Pleasure. I'm also a somatic intimacy coach and relationship educator. And you can find out more about me on my website, ailsakepi.com. I'm really excited about today, and I'm already finding lots of work for myself to dive back into, even though it's been many, many years that I've been doing this type of work. It comes around, one thing that I'll say up front is that the first thing you might say to this type of inner child work or this type of deeper work is, well, I've done this all before. I've been here before. Why am I facing it all again? And short answer is we are going around in cycles, hopefully going in a cycle that is heading in a direction of more enlightenment or more consciousness. But we do have cycles of that. And so we do come back around to get more fruitfulness from our experiences, to learn more, to go deeper with stuff. So if you feel like you've been here before, that's great. And here we are again, and let's be joyful about that in a childlike way, as we're going to talk about. So sometimes it's necessary to kind of go around and keep coming back to these same things. And of course, most of us did not grow up with the ideal childhood. We all have our various challenges in our family of origin and with our experiences of childhood. So most of us will have work to do as far as reparenting or finding ways to take what actually happened and transform that into ways that we can support ourselves to grow through different stages that we maybe had to kind of skip over because our parents weren't capable of helping with that, or it just wasn't possible in the moment. I've worked with people that have, one parent has gotten really sick or died, or all these types of things that happen to kind of stop us from going through the natural progression of maturing through all of the stages. And so it's not unlikely that we end up in an adult body with some of these qualities of our child, our inner child, that didn't get a chance to fully mature, to fully grow up. So with that being said, when we realize that it should be a matter of kind of necessity that we start looking at that and that we try to actually help ourselves to grow through those stages so that we can actually move out in the world and match our adult body with our adult inner consciousness so that we're actually having a positive effect on relationships that we're having in the world as an adult, and that we can actually offer our gifts to the world. So if we all walked around like 2-year-olds or 3-year-olds, the world wouldn't progress the way that most of us would like to see it. We want to bring our wisdom of our years here on earth to some fruition. So when these inner and outer feelings don't match, that's a clue that we have some work to do. So, many people are like, well, how do I know if I have inner child work to do? Well, aside from the fact, like I said, most of us have or could benefit from more, what you want to notice are things like you go in a situation, you're feeling, pretty grown up, and you talk to your mother on the phone, or you are in front of a group of students, you're a teacher, and all of a sudden you feel yourself acting out or acting in a way that isn't really relevant to the current situation. You're kind of like, why am I so angry about this? Or why do I suddenly feel like I'm, a little kid again being told off by my mom? And so when you notice stuff like that, then that's a really good sign that, hey, there's something here to work with. I can work with this. And I think the biggest I mean, other than getting a therapist or a coach, which I do recommend because we sometimes need that nurturing, that hand holding through some of these really difficult stages. But we can, ideally, the role of a therapist or coach is to help us to help ourselves. So we don't want to become a child to a parental role of a therapist that we have to stay with forever and ever. We want to actually be helped to mature and grow. So, that's another clue that I ask women before I work with them. I'm like, well, how long have you been seeing such and such therapist? And if it's years and years and years, I mean, you may have had a lot of trauma, and so that's great. But there may also be some kind of getting stuck in a rut with that person and needing to kind of take a bit more responsibility for saying, yeah, you know what? I actually have some tools now and I can move forward. So again, I'm not saying stop seeing your therapist, but I'm saying ask yourself, and the therapist should be asking themselves, am I helping this person to become more responsible, more mature, more able to handle their life in an adult way? And, where is that point? We all know, if those of you who are moms will know that not all kids are created equal. Some of them are ready for the world younger than others, and some need more nurturing than others. So we are all like that too. So this is, something to reckon with, is to kind of be mindful of ourselves. So we often also, as women, define our kind of maturity, our criteria for being grown up, based on our roles in life. And what I mean by that is we often imagine that, okay, I'm grown up because I'm a mother. I'm grown up because I have a real job now. I'm grown up because I own a house. I'm grown up because, I don't know, I drive a car. So we kind of define being grown up by these roles. And of course, that is part of it. But to actually be mature and grown up, that really has very little to do with it. We actually have to mature and grow up in our wisdom and in our inner and outer self. So the process of life as we live it is what helps us mature. Are we actually learning from the experiences that we've gone through? Are we actually taking the material that life is giving us and working with it and becoming wiser because of it? And that processing is part of what helps us mature as an inner being. So now, we probably all know people that are parents, whatever age parents, with kids, and they're not really that mature, right? They haven't really got the wisdom to be in a parental role, and we're like, oh, how could they be parenting? They're just a big kid themselves. And that is possibly true. And so we want to actually take the wisdom and grow up. And I don't mean also being really solemn and firm and depressing, right? Being grown up does not mean that we leave behind the wonder and the joy and the jubilance and the playfulness of being a child, but that we grow up and we move through some of the stages, which I'm going to talk about as far as inner child work. So most of us don't usually just grow up just because. We kind of are thrust into it. I think that's part of, even being born, if you think about that, it's a being thrust into the world. Many of us didn't want to come out, or going from that really safe, comfy place to like, it's freezing cold world. We are again, living through that process of having to grow up and being kind of thrust into it because maybe, you had to leave home, or you had to take over the role of being mom because your mom was sick and you had to look after your younger siblings, or, whatever that was that life thrust upon you, you had to then take that and grow up. So it's kind of a crisis point, this kind of, oh my gosh, I have to grow up here. I have to put my big girl panties or my big boy underwear on, let's say, or, big person underclothing, if you want to be gender neutral. And, we put that on and we want to move forward in life. And it's a kind of a thrusting motion. It feels hard. It just feels hard. It feels like a lot of work. Um, and sometimes if in our childhood we've come upon these points of growing and we've not been allowed to move through that, so things like helicopter parenting of maybe this last, couple decades has actually retarded our children from growing up because they're not reaching a challenge point and being able to transform through it or find their own strength. They're actually just being kind of coddled through, which basically leads to you being 20 and still not actually having dealt with any of your own crises, your own struggles. So, I'm not going to go into a whole parenting thing. You can parent how you like, but it has an effect. The way that we deal with childhood, and perhaps you didn't get a chance to reach a crisis point and move through it in any kind of empowering way. Maybe it just was a traumatic way for you. Maybe you had, an alcoholic parent, and you had to, deal with cooking dinner and this and that and all the rest, but you didn't actually get to feel empowered through it. You just kind of were defeated by it. And so these crises that come up in our life end up not helping us to transform, but just we kind of numb out to the crises of life, and we numb out to the opportunity to transform. And a lot of women that I talk to actually come upon these points, these crisis points, these transformation points, and they aren't able to take a step forward and use that to transform because they've become kind of numbed out. There's just been overwhelming number of crises and trauma in their life. And so they end up just kind of reliving these trauma points, these crises, turning points, and actually not transforming or using that as material to move forward. And I'm not blaming anyone here, but life will continue to put those points in front of you in your present time, because life kind of wants us to go through a process of maturing. So it will continue to give us these turning points. So the more that you can take hold of these turning points and really work them and use that process to transform yourself, you move on to the kind of next, and it gets easier as you go. I have to say that it's like growing up. You gain trust in yourself. You gain all the skills as you go along. It's like, kind of like playing a video game, where you collect the tools and the extra food and the extra energy packs or whatever it is. I don't play video games now, but you get what I mean. You start collecting things. And then as you move through life, you are more resilient. You have more tools. You know what you're doing. This is becoming more of an adult. So often when we hit these crisis points, these kind of turning points, what happens too is that we come up against, the grief, those unresolved emotions that we didn't deal with at the time, with the crisis that came up before, or in our childhood when we were, told that, no, you can't do that because, I don't know, girls don't do that, or we don't have the money to send you to, summer camp, so you have to stay and do this other thing, whatever. If we weren't seen in our creativity, or we weren't seen in our interests and our gifts, and we were kind of squashed, then, that grief will stay there, and that grieving is part of doing our inner child work. So working through a grief process sometimes doesn't happen until we get to a certain age and we lose our job, we lose a relationship, we lose a child, God forbid, or we lose a spouse, or something happens, and then the grief comes up. And often the grieving process then opens up these deeper wounds that have occurred to us in our life. And so this grieving is part of the inner child work, because we're grieving that abandonment. We're grieving that time that, our little heart was broken because we made a beautiful Valentine's card for our parent and they just, never even really looked at it, or whatever. Like those points, those are big griefs for, a 5-year-old kid. And we, sometimes we come back and we have a lot of grieving to do. So we have to, grieve abandonment, abuse in all forms, Neglect is a big one, right? In childhood, in our needs, our needs were neglected. Maybe we had enmeshments with our family entanglements. Those warrant a whole video in and of themselves. We might have to do that at some point. But each stage might need to be grieved. Each thing that we missed out on in our ideal kind of developmental stages. So this is just a quote from John Bradshaw, who was a big inner child psychologist. He kind of started the work on inner child, or was one of the founding people that started that. The more we know about how we lost our spontaneous wonder and creativity, the more we can find ways to get them back. So the more ways we actually acknowledge we lost, we lost those childlike, that hope, the trust, the wonder, the creativity, the playfulness, the more you kind of can dig into how that happened and when that happened, the more we can help ourselves reparenting ourselves back so that we can gain those amazing qualities back again that kind of make our life worth living, right? Like having that childlike wonder is important. Now, we don't necessarily want to stay naive and stay as a 2 or 3 or 4-year-old, but we'd love to have some of those qualities of trust and hope and, wonder and delight, all that. So there's 4 basic ego strengths that we work with as we go through childhood. And if we don't go through childhood, then these are the things we can work with as inner child work. One is hope. And hope is something that, I personally can speak to, having gotten to a place where I didn't have hope. Something was lost. Like I was like, I don't have hope that anything can get better. I don't have hope that there's anything else out there. And if that's where you're at, there's not much place to go from there. So we have to find our hope. And that requires trust. It requires a trust in something. And if you don't feel that you have an ability to trust, sometimes you just have to, find a therapist or a coach or someone that you're like, okay, I'm going to believe you and trust myself that I can do this. And I'm just going to do that anyway, even if it's not 100%, I'm going to take it, take myself by the scruff of the neck and say, you know what, you got to trust something. Let's try this process. You got to trust someone. Let's just try this thing. So, working with trust and mistrust helps to deal with hope. So there's much work to do around that. And then willpower, having the will to choose to do something is something that we gain from this type of inner child work. And this is working on strengthening our autonomy, our sense of self, rather than letting our shame and our doubt rule our existence. We have to realize that we have to muster the willpower to take a step forward, or muster the willpower to do something, change something, say something, whatever that is. So it requires this sense of self. Another thing that we work on with ego strength is purpose. What is the purpose? Like, why am I here? What is my purpose? And finding that again finds that initiative to say, yes, I'm going to take a sewing lesson, take sewing lessons and learn how to make my own clothes, because something I loved as a kid was cutting out little things and making doll clothes or whatever that is. And I'm going to take initiative and do that and not feel guilty that, I'm taking away money that could be spent on my kids, or guilty that I'm spending time doing this when I should be cleaning the house or making money or whatever. So we have a purpose. We find our purpose, and that is a whole body of work that you can work with your inner child. And then competence is something that we come to, that we can practice and become good at something, right? And, competence is, you might have heard that around school. You have competency in this. Well, actually gaining skills is important to mature. So, if you have competency, I don't know, you could find it in anything. I can get dressed really well or brush my teeth, or, I have competence in looking after my skin, or whatever that is. It doesn't have to be competence in aerodynamics or, space technology or anything like really complicated, but we want to have skills that we know we have. And it's funny because a lot of those old ballads back in the day, were like, can you sew cushions, and can you sew sheets, and can you cook dinner, and can you do that? I mean, this is very genderized for women, but there were competencies that we were expected to have in order to be an adult. Can you, make a bow and a spear? Can you get out and hunt can you shoot a bull, or whatever it was that was, the competency for being an adult. Nowadays, there's like this huge array of choice, and it's hard to say what competencies we would need to be an adult nowadays. So we kind of have to find that through our own purpose, through our own interests, and through our own creativity. What competencies are we going to move towards? And so we find that through industry, through practice, rather than feeling inferiority complex of like, oh, I'm never good enough. It's no point me trying because there's already, millions of people that are doing that thing. It doesn't matter. These are things we want to become competent in. So you can see these, like, learning these ego strengths help us to mature. So we give ourselves permission, and we give ourselves some kind of kick in the rear end to start this work. And then the best news is that since our child was potentially wounded through neglect and learning deficits, that we can learn to get the child's needs met as an adult. We can meet those needs because they were deficits. They were things that we could have learned but we didn't learn. So we have the possibility to learn them now. We can develop skills in all the areas of human interaction. It's not a question of unlearning. It's just a question of learning things for the first time. So as we do our inner child work, we're helping, as if we're actually helping a child move forward. We actually take ourselves and do the things. And I'm going to run through a few examples of things you might learn through these different stages of childhood. Again, this is just one framework. But let's say you're an infant, so a very young child. Your main role is just to be. You don't do anything, you're just there. And you have to learn to do that. And as an adult, if you weren't allowed to just be, or you weren't loved and accepted to just, be there, you can help rework that now. Something like, I loved the idea of having your partner, like, or a friend or someone just like wash your hair for you, or something like that. You're just being, you're not doing anything. Probably why we love going to the hairdressers, right? We just be there, and somebody nurtures us and looks after us. That is a nurturing of that. I can just be, right? Somebody just, washing our hair for us, something like that. So we want to explore those types of things. There's many ways you can work with that. And, a lot of what I work with clients is sort of helping do some of these interactive activities that would help someone to experience these types of things so that they can grow in these ways. You imagine then coming to be kind of a toddler and, the terrible twos, and you're like, no. So sometimes, depending on your situation, you didn't get a chance to say no, or it was too scary in your household to say no, or I won't do that. So relearning how to say no and, have a tantrum. Maybe you were never allowed to. It wasn't okay in your household to even go there. So you buried your little feelings because you needed the safety of having a family. So you buried that. But now, as an adult, you can't say no to anybody. You're too scared to have confrontation. So we need to work with that ability to feel your resistance, feel your no. Maybe you don't have a tantrum in the boardroom or, at work or, with your spouse, but knowing that you feel resistance, working on your own, finding that 2-year-old tantrum and then being able to transform that into an adult way of saying, actually, I don't feel okay with that. I'd like to discuss compromising in this way, right? So then we become more adept as we work through all these things to dealing with things in a more adult way. So, fighting fair is a toddler kind of thing, like, not being underhanded. And we all know people that don't fight fair, and it's, that kind of thing. Exploring things. Are you able to go and explore stuff, or do you, stay at home not wanting to try anything new? These are things we might do as a toddler. Moving into preschool, there might be things like, excuse me, asking questions. I know a lot of people come and they're like, well, I loved asking questions. Like, why this? Why that? Daddy, why does the moon, da, da, da. And maybe you were shut down around asking questions, or you were shamed for asking too many questions. So refinding your curiosity is something that we can work on as inner child work. Freeing your imagination can be inner child work. If you were told, don't daydream, don't do this, like just focus on, what's in front of you. Why are you off in your, imaginary realm and you were shamed, or you have an imaginary friend? What are you doing? You're stupid. Whatever was the shaming thing around that, a lot of times finding our imagination. And other things that we did as preschoolers that we may not have gotten to learn. For school age, things like setting intellectual boundaries, social skills. I've talked to a couple of university professors that I know, and they're really noticing a difference these days with kids that their last couple years in high school were at home because of COVID, and so they haven't had these social interactions. They're behind developmentally when they go to university. They're not able to cope with coming forward and advocating for themselves, or talking to a teacher, or all these things. And even just school age in general, to know who are we, what do we value, having an idea and standing up for it. Those kinds of skills we learn at a certain age, and if we don't get a chance to do that again, we can actually help ourselves to learn that later. And finally, things like breaking the enmeshment with your parents. Sometimes, especially in emotionally dysfunctional families, or just all over dysfunctional families, sometimes single parent families, you get this enmeshment cross-generationally between parent child, where often the parent takes the child to be more like a partner, and it becomes like a non-physically but still kind of sexually violating relationship there. Oh, you're my little man. A mom might say that to her son. You're my little man. You're going to take me, whatever. And, if this little boy now is trying to manage an adult relationship with his mother, there's an enmeshment there that can stop the child from going through the stages that they need to go through. And then finishing our own myth, our own story of how we see ourselves going through childhood into adulthood. There's many stories of, I was reading, about the wonder child. We have many different kind of child archetypes that we might resonate with. And I think relevant to today, the wonder child might be maybe also known as the divine child, like the birth of Jesus or Moses or Krishna, or well, maybe not Krishna. I'm actually unfamiliar with some of the other versions of this, but there was like a child that was born of royal blood, let's say, or in an unusual way, and they get somehow, like Moses was put in a basket and then raised by a different family, or things like that. They get brought up a different way, but they actually have this amazing capacity to regenerate, to bring new life to the world. And in some ways that is often at odds with the power structures that be at the time that this child is born. That's a threat to the current power structures. So I think in this time in the world, we often are feeling that we are needing to be reborn to bring, a different way of looking at the world and to challenge the current power structures. And again, I'm not going to go into politics, but I think that finding our inner child in that divine, that wonder, that imagination, that ability to know ourselves and to really bring ourselves into maturity in that way is going to be the thing that allows us to move forward as a human population, hopefully. And if we stay childlike, if we're just kind of toddlers in adult bodies, we are not going to be able to have that full wisdom that we could access as a whole. That's my personal opinion. Take it or leave it. But so this type of inner child work is probably the foundational work to be doing at this time, at any time, but especially at this time. And like I said, it goes through these stages. So, and grieving is part of that. Working on empowerment is part of that. Working on all of these skills and learnings that we maybe didn't get along the way. We maybe skipped over something. And often we have grown up in, 7/8 of our being is pretty adult, but this one little slice never got dealt with properly, and we kind of feel never grew up. I mean, personally, came really clear to me when I left home at 15. I went away to school and different things, and so finally in my life, it worked out that I ended up coming back to my childhood home with my 4 children as I was getting myself reoriented to being back in Canada and different things. And as soon as I came back, I felt like I was 15 again in my childhood home with my parents, because I'd kind of severed that relationship, that learning that I might have potentially gone through with my parents. And I just decided, I'm out, I'm going away. And I went away for years and years and matured in lots of ways, for sure. But coming back really kind of brought it starkly in front of me that there were certain areas that I had not yet grown up in. And so, it started a lot of journey with counseling and different psychologies and studying and all of the things that I bring to you and to my clients now. Were kind of learnings that I've gone through and I'm still going through and sharing with you. In a lots of hope that it brings you some direction in your journey as well. So, it was really starkly apparent because I could feel it. I felt like I was 15 again. I was like, whoa, I feel like I'm a teenager. How did that happen? Because I was doing so well out here. So if you have those types of realizations, there's some parts of you that may be calling for some opportunity to do this inner child work. And I'm going to be doing I'm going to be starting a year-long program in April. It's on archetypes, but we actually are going to start with the child archetype in April. No, the last Tuesday of March, actually. And it's going to be a Zoom class. It's just going to be once a month, a 2-hour Zoom class with some kind of questions to reflect on during the month. So, as far as price point, it's going to be pretty reasonable because a lot of the work is just out, for you to reflect on the class every month. And we're going to take different archetypes and different kind of myths and look at them and see how we can find more consciousness of who we are and how we need to grow through that. I also have other online courses. I have ways to work with me more intentionally, more fully, that I'd love to be able to share with you. You can check it out on ailsakepi.com. Or shoot me a message and I will get in touch with you. We can set up a phone call to see where you're at and what might work for you. But it's been really my pleasure to share with you today a little bit about inner child work and how important it is and how much it's really helped me in my journey. And I hope that that's been interesting for you and maybe sparked some curiosity in you. So much blessings for you on your day, and I will see you all soon.